So today we're going to be talking about a statement made by Noel Gallagher in a recent interview with Gibson TV, and the article that has transcribed it, or at least made it a news story, is from Ultimate Guitar. It was published in last September, so well over 6 months old, but I still think it's relevant as ever. And the title goes, Noel Gallagher on the state of the music industry, great rock stories like Oasis aren't possible anymore. So what we'll do is we'll read, analyze, jump straight into it. I'll throw my 2 cents into this article. Now, Noel Gallagher argued that the band thing is pretty dead right now, adding how people shouldn't pursue a career in music to get famous, but have passion and love for their art. I mean, the latter half of that statement is obviously true. If you want to acquire fame or notoriety through music, there are easier ways in doing so. And to be honest with you, to pursue music as a creative and to really chase that artistic conclusion to your songs, the songs that and the recordings that the Straits have made have been a labour of love in the studio, and I don't think you do that without that love being there, the passion and the obsession. Just listening to records, and even if I was a successful musician, with a monocle and a top hat and a drug habit and a mansion, I'd still be listening to the records I am now. But I think you do it for the love of music. In regards to the first half of that statement, the band thing, well, understandably, you don't exactly have the cultural zeitgeist effect that many bands from yesteryear, bands like Nirvana, Oasis, The Strokes, Arctic Monkeys, and I'll throw Kasabian in there. Bands that really did change the course or the trajectory of musical trends and culture. You don't really get that in a in a four-piece rock band or a five-piece rock band, but you do still get successful bands. I mean, look over the last 5 years, pulling sort of names out of my arse right now. You'd think of Wolf Alice have had a number one album, Gold Certification in the UK, Wet Leg have had a number one album, went gold in the UK, and obviously you have bands like the Last Dinner Party that have acquired quite a lot of success, excuse me, and with a recent number one album. And there's numerous bands that are releasing, whether that's being on medium-sized or small-sized independent labels, or just self-releasing albums and releases, and successfully getting into the charts, into the top 100 of the UK. And obviously, in regards to rock, you do have solo artists like Sam Fender who have penetrated the mainstream, especially with his anthemic single 17 Going Under, getting at number 3, or achieving the chart position of number 3, shall I say, in the UK singles chart. But without putting words into Noel's mouth or trying to interpret what he says, I do somewhat understand what he's getting at. Bands in general, especially rock bands, aren't exactly on the forefront of culture, let alone musical culture. The times have definitely changed since Oasis rose from Manchester's council estates to take over the world. And obviously, it's been 30 years, and I love this band, but I don't want to start pointing out the obvious. And one of its core members thinks we'll never see a similar time ever again. In a bleak prediction delivered in a recent interview with Gibson TV, Noel Gallagher has stated that the great rags to riches rock stories are over. And obviously that's what I think people, people are fascinated when bands like Nirvana, who are at sort of like an indie alternative level, really do just explode in popularity and cultural significance. And you can say that for numerous bands like the White Stripes, where they released singles on bedroom labels, and their first couple of albums didn't really get that much attention in the States where they're from, but certainly acquired some cult status, or status, shall I say, over here as a result of John Peel sessions and music journalism like The Enemy at the time. Let's proceed. Even so, it's not all doom and gloom. According to Noel, that being said, if you're good, you'll get there. There's no question about that. But the music business has changed. One of these changes, as per the former Oasis and current high-flying birds star, means that bands are much less likely to find success. Even he considers good songwriting to be still a value. I mean, what's your definition of success? How long is a piece of string? And of course, songwriting. I think people are still attracted, especially music fans, people who collect records or really do regularly attend gigs and just admire creativity and especially good songwriting. Um, I mean, commercial success, maybe he's getting at, because you get some bands who might not necessarily have a breakout single or maybe a significant sort of charting position, but they do have an audience and they do have a means of touring. Right, we'll proceed with this quote. I think the band thing at the moment is pretty dead, but songwriting is really fucking important. I mean, there's not one piece of advice you could say, well, if you do this, you're going to get that. It doesn't work like that. If you're into writing songs, write as many as you can and then play them to other people, and then somebody will play them to somebody else and use whatever the mediums are to get it out there. Yeah, I mean, I do think that if you have an album or you have songs that are strong enough and have the legs to withstand scrutiny and that has some sort of artistic value, I do think they will eventually travel. It's a slow burn. The Straits have released 9 singles, and we have been played on FM radio well over 100 times. We've supported the likes of Inspiral Carpets, Buzzcocks, Blue Tones, and have played you know festivals with bigger bands. So I do think that at the end of the day, you can have the best promotion or the best PR or the best manager, but if the songs fall flat, um, it'll pretty much fizzle out eventually. You can only get by uh, so much on industry buzz or promotion. You got to really be able to deliver the goods at the end of the day. I mean, that goes without saying. But you shouldn't, this is a quote, but you shouldn't get into it to be famous or successful. The music itself is a reward. That's what it is. The greatest gift I've ever got from is Don't Look Back in Anger was the song itself. In quiet times when I'm at home, I play the song to myself, I sing it to myself, and that's the greatest reward. Yeah, I mean, I've done that with my own songs that, you know, aren't even recorded. And it's one of those things that I think you are mesmerized that you've created this from scratch, that you've started with silence and you've written this song that you feel really passionate that there's something there. And obviously that, um, especially when you release a song and you hear it on the radio, there isn't a greater buzz than that. And especially when those songs are listened to and they're purchased by strangers. I mean, it's great when friends, families, and acquaintances listen to your music and they speak somewhat kindly about it. But when it's really an audience where there's no sort of bias there, and at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want people like yourself who are viewing this to listen to your songs and make a judgment for themselves. I mean, the article's quite short, but I think it's quite an interesting observation that Noel has made, where bands aren't at the forefront. There's many bands at the moment who I find are releasing fantastic music, whether that's not commercially successful in the eyes of the industry. At least it can be you know creatively successful. And that can be a mixture of genres. One of those bands that I've seen recently that was like a religious experience was Amyl and the Sniffers, and just uncompromising, ferocious sort of Australian punk that is just full of grit and is strangely addictive and scratches an itch that you didn't know you had. And lots of bands, you can go down the rabbit hole of bands on Spotify. And as a result of the internet, even though the traditional method, a band like Oasis back then, uh, they would have needed someone else to facilitate getting into a recording studio or releasing their music or distributing their music or getting on the radio. And obviously, I couldn't comprehend how they did it, especially bands of that era, the pre-digital age, because I'm very fortunate that I'm not relying on someone else to distribute my music, because the traditional gatekeepers aren't there. But as we know, new gatekeeping and new sort of parameters are set by the current industry, and I think that's what you're doing. You're sort of, when the Straits release music, because we're releasing it on streaming services and things like Bandcamp and Apple Music and Spotify, there is this infinite distribution where traditionally you needed, if you had physical format or physical media, whether that be cassette, CD, or vinyl, you needed to distribute it into the retail, the music retail, that people would then go and purchase their music. But now, the Straits can release a single, and within 24 hours, someone in South Africa or someone in Mississippi can be listening to our music. So yeah, that's a plus side. But or bands like Oasis would then have to to do what they did, and to have the studio time, and whether that's just the to hire the facility, they would have had to put money into it themselves, to get their feet off the ground. Like many bands now, is it's all self-funded. I mean, and that's what people don't realize, that to make an album, you're looking at least £10,000 to make, and that's in like a decent studio. You obviously you have the technical ability to do it at home, but when you have someone who's got previous experience and might be able to add a new dimension to an idea that you have, it's very well worth it. And you know I still don't think that's expensive necessarily to make a record, but in terms of a single, albums aside, it depends how long. I mean, this could cost you a couple £100 for the studio that day, but they'll cost you that again for the mix. So what we're going to do, without me just talking at you, we're going to wrap it up, and I'll see you next time.